Number 1. Sleeping. I have not told this story to anyone in a long time. However, I really enjoy watching your videos, KOC, so I wanted to tell the story. I insist that the story be told anonymously, however. I remember this vividly. It's one of those flashbulb memories, and it used to haunt me for the longest time. I was 12 years old at the time. It was a Friday, and I was at school. It was a very, very windy day, and after a little while, it began getting overcast as well. The clouds were very dark, and just got darker and darker. I spent a bit of time in class watching the weather out the window, because at the time I really enjoyed that sort of thing. It was very windy as I was walking home. Most of the students that went to that school walked rather than took a bus. It was a semi-urban area that we lived in, I suppose. I lived in a subdivision that was not far from the school, but still it was a pretty decent walk home. I enjoyed walking it with the storm brewing above me. It began thundering on my way home, and that did concern me just a little. I didn't want to get wet. I could be scared of thunder and lightning, but normally it was only if I was in bed by myself in the dark. Outside walking through the neighborhood, it definitely didn't bother me at all. I was lucky and made it home before any rain began falling. I was lucky because whenever it stormed lately, my mom would make cans of Chef Boyardee Pac-Man pasta for me to eat. This was during the 80s, during the period of time where everything was Pac-Man. I even liked the pasta can, because you could take the label off, and there were games and trivia on the inside of the label. The storming went on for a very long time, and unfortunately, it continued through the time for me to go to sleep. My parents actually went to sleep not long after I did, so that didn't help make me comfortable, alone in my room with the storm. I'm not really sure how long I laid there, especially after I heard my parents go to their bedroom to sleep. I just remained in bed, watching the light from the bolts bounce off the wall, illuminating some things while making shadows of other things that likely didn't exist. But eventually, being young and tired, I fell asleep. I woke up. When I did, it was a very weird feeling. It is hard to explain what had happened. If you've ever woken up like that, you feel like someone had hit you or something, and when you open your eyes, you're not quite sure where you are or what exactly is going on. When my eyes adjusted, I saw the scariest thing I had ever seen. Standing by my bed was a man with a knife. He was right beside me, and obviously something about his presence is what woke me up. I wanted to scream, but I was just frozen. I didn't know what to do. Time was also frozen, and everything seemed to be going in slow motion. I was able to let out the beginning of a scream before he took his gloved hand and put it over my mouth. I was terrified in that moment. I thought I was going to die. He took the knife and put it up to my throat. I was breathing heavy and tears were streaming down my eyes. I kept waiting for him to slice my throat open, but he kept taking his time, like he was enjoying my fear, and that just made it scarier. There was a loud crack of thunder, which was immediately followed by another really loud crack of thunder. For some reason, I didn't know at first. The man dropped the knife and fell over. It was so weird, and I didn't know what had happened at first. But then the light flipped on, and I saw my mother standing in the door. She was holding her gun in her hand. It was obvious then that she had shot the guy who had the knife to my throat. She hadn't killed the guy, but he didn't get back up. She ran and got me off the bed and out of the room, constantly holding the gun at the now groaning intruder. She instructed me to go down the hallway to her room while she waited at the door with the gun to keep him from getting up. I guess my dad had called the police while my mom came with a gun. My mom was going to the bathroom when she noticed my door was closed. She never let us close our doors while we were sleeping. She then heard the beginning of my scream that was cut off, so she then ran and got the gun, threw the door open, and didn't hesitate to shoot the man standing at the bed. The man was arrested. I won't mention his name here because I don't want people knowing who I am. They will just start asking me questions again about the experience, and I don't want to answer them. It took me forever to consider letting anyone read the story to begin with. Number 2. Tunnel. This really might not seem like the scariest story, so I'm sorry if it doesn't scare anyone, but it was really scary to me when it happened. When I began going to school, I always walked to school. In K through 2nd grade, my mom always walked with me. However, when I began 3rd grade, I began walking by myself. It didn't seem like a big deal at the time, and everyone did it. There were bunches of kids walking to school. On the walk to school, we always came down a road, with another road that led to a forest. We didn't ever take that road that went into the forest, but that road, which was actually more of a path than a road, I guess, there was a small bridge right on the edge of the forest, and there was a big circle metal tunnel under that bridge. You could always see it in the distance. Now, I never really thought anything about that bridge when I was walking to school with my mom, but when I began walking alone, I began hearing stories about the bridge, and the boys in school had all different ideas about what might be under that bridge in the tunnel. We were young. We had heard the story about the billy goat's gruff, so it was natural for us to wonder. There were often people, adults of course, that we saw walking over towards the forest. Of course, since it was a trail, people would be jogging on it too. But also, of course, we never saw anyone walk under the bridge through the tunnel. When I was in the 5th grade, I had a group of friends that I regularly walked to school with. 5th grade boys had a lot of bravado. We were always daring each other to do stupid things or to do things that were potentially scary. And of course, this included talking about that metal tunnel. At this point in time, there was a very specific story about that tunnel. At the time, the story was that there was a serial killer living under the bridge. He would lure children under the bridge and kill them there. This was going on for a long time. One day, my friends and I were hanging out after school. We were talking about what to do when one of my friends dared me to walk through the tunnel. I really didn't want to, but you know the way the young boys are. I was being called a chicken, among many other mean names, and when that happened, you had to go through with it. So we began walking on the trail over to the trees. I kept telling myself that people jogged on the trail all the time. If there was a serial killer living under it, people would know about it. I wish that I had the power to take away the fear I was feeling, but I unfortunately did not. Once we got over to the bridge, I was dared to walk down to the little ditch that ran through the tunnel and walk through the whole thing. At this point, the boys were not going to come any further. I had to do that part by myself. So I did. I walked down and got to the bottom of the ditch. My heart was racing, scared that I would get killed. The mind of a 10-year-old can come up with almost anything. When I got to the bottom of the ditch, I looked over at the tunnel. It wasn't a very long tunnel, but it was a bit dark inside. I could see over to the other side, and there was light there. It didn't look like there was anyone in the tunnel, but I suppose someone could be sitting down in it where I couldn't see. I began walking toward the tunnel. It smelled absolutely horrible and overwhelming, and I stepped cautiously into it. I walked a few steps, my eyes darting around the tunnel. I yelped when I saw someone in the tunnel. It was like I thought it was someone sitting down in a dark spot in the tunnel. I was terrified and almost ran out of the tunnel, but I stopped. I realized that the person in the tunnel was not moving at all, and it was a pretty small person, so instead of running, I walked up to that person, and I did it very slowly. If he or she jumped up and was going to come after me, that would have been terrifying, and I wanted to be able to run and get away if I could. When I got close enough, I noticed it looked like a young boy my age. I tried to get his attention, but he didn't respond. I nudged him a few times, and he didn't respond. The smell was coming from him, and his skin was a ghastly color that I cannot describe. I thought he must be dead. I immediately thought of the serial killer, and I just panicked. I ran out of the tunnel as quickly as I could, expecting the serial killer to come and get me. I was on the far side of the tunnel, so I just ran out that way. My friends were all excited that I went through the entire tunnel, but they could tell I was scared. I told them that a dead boy was under the bridge, but they didn't believe me. I kept telling them I was telling the truth and that we had to go get the police, but they didn't believe me. I went back to the school with my friends and told the principal about it. He ended up calling the cops, and they went to the tunnel. At first, my principal thought it was a prank because he knew about the stories of the child killer who lived under the bridge. I think it was my fear, my sheer fear, that convinced him he had to make sure. It was the dead boy that was found under the bridge. He had been kidnapped from a different state and apparently had been missing for months. They had been unable to find him or the kidnapper. The boy died from suffocation. The police suspected that it was accidental death and that the kidnapper hid the dead body in the tunnel and fled. I don't know whatever happened with the case. I checked several times to see if I could find any information on it, but I never have. But I was so afraid that day, and I had never been that scared before or after. Number 3. Elaine. This story might bother some people. It's not a story about a fictional monster, an intruder or a robber, or anything like that. It's the story of a woman named Elaine, who the Navy made our live-in babysitter after my parents got divorced. The things that woman did to me have scarred me to this day. Often the scariest people are the ones who are let into your life willingly. I was 11 years old, I think. I don't know for sure. But my dad got custody of us, and he had to often go out to sea. The Navy provided a live-in babysitter for the children, me, my brother, and sister. The first one was Lee. She was pregnant and so nice and kind, but she moved out after one weekend. She was crying when she left and told us that she loved us. We found out later that she quit because my father was making sexual advances on her. So Elaine moved in with her son Aries, and yeah, that was actually his name. Elaine was a large and scary woman. She was a Jehovah's Witness, and yet it's important to know that because she didn't celebrate holidays. We loved holidays, but she looked down on us for liking them. She would often throw out gifts that we had gotten for holidays because she thought it was wrong of us to have them. My first problem with Elaine was when one of my Transformer toys fell on the floor and she stepped on it. With absolutely no regard for it, she took every single robot toy I had and threw them in the trash. When I began crying, she told me to stop crying, but I couldn't. So when I didn't, she threw away all of my He-Man toys. I had Castle Grayskull, Snake Mountain, and maybe 30 figures. She threw away nearly every toy I had, and my dad did nothing about it. My brother David was the only protector I had. He grew up to be the toughest man I'd ever known in my life, but at the time, even he was not able to always be there when the evil of this woman came out. My brother had this glow-in-the-dark mask. I wanted to wear it once to have fun. It was so awesome. But while I was wearing it, Elaine came into the room and noticed it. She tore the mask off my head and told me it was a sin to use someone else's property without asking first. Elaine made me stand by the bed. I had to put both of my hands on the bed. She read something from the Bible or something about stealing. It was ridiculous because I didn't steal anything. My brother and I always shared toys, it's just what we did. But I stood there and listened, and looked at the belt that was lying by her hand. I knew what was coming. Elaine took the belt and began beating my hands with it. She did it over and over and didn't stop until my hands were covered in welts. I was crying my eyes out, and she kept screaming at me to stop crying. She told me the more I cried, the more she would hit me. I was 11 years old and scared and in pain. This is my central nervous system making me cry, something that evil fucking bitch never understood, and what she did caused my hands to bleed. When I was in the 3rd grade, I'd broken my wrist. My worthless father never took me to the doctor, for even though we were a Navy family and it would have been free, he just didn't do it. To this day, my hand is lame because of that. She broke the bone again, where she was attacking me with that belt. To this day, I have severe arthritis in my wrists and hands. After the vicious beating, I cried for hours on my bed. My dad confronted her about it, and I will never forget her response to him. I did it out of love. Fucking bullshit. Love? I'm so sorry for getting angry. I have never told this full story before, and I want to tell it to you like I am talking. I am putting every thought down on this imaginary paper. Now, Aries was a good kid. I always felt sorry for him having Elaine as a mom. He was obviously gay. He and a boy named Tony always held hands in school. Aries would braid his hair in class, and they would always be together. But he would play video games together with me, and Uno. We liked telling each other, "No shit, Sherlock." He even gave me a Peter Porker, the Amazing Spider-Ham comic. I wondered about him often and what happened to him. There was one period of time where Elaine decided the whole family had to ignore me. They were playing Uno together without me. My sister wanted me to play, and she kept asking me to. Elaine kept yelling at her and ordering her not to talk to me. My dad didn't do anything until my sister began crying because she wanted to talk to me. My dad never showed me an ounce of love in my life, but he was overprotective of my sister. They got into a heated argument, and he told her to stop ignoring me, and if she ever did that again, he would fire her. So how does a story like this climax? A week before Thanksgiving, me, my sister, my brother, and Aries all caught the flu, and we had it really, really bad. I mean, I almost died at one point. Well, I was very bored. Time went by very slowly, and I was hot. Stomach hurting, head hurting. I was in hell. Elaine at one point decided unsweetened peppermint tea would be the perfect thing for us. I'm a big tea drinker now, actually. A cup of Earl Grey hot makes my life. But that tea was horrible. My sister and I kept getting ill from it. We would run into the bathroom and throw it up. But Elaine kept making us drink it. We each barfed about 4 times. When we were crying, she threatened to beat us with a fly swatter if we didn't stop crying. To this day, my sister and I cannot stand peppermint, but we loved it before that. When my sister tried to pour the tea out in the toilet while she was throwing up, Elaine caught her, yelled at her, made a new full cup of tea, and made her drink it and throw up more times. I wanted something to do, so I asked my dad for a drawing pad. I'm not a good drawer. My sister, brother, and Aries had art talent. At the time, I didn't know what my art talent was. Elaine decided that she would take the drawing pad away from me because I was trying to copy Aries and David. She actually forbade me from being able to draw, and again threatened me when I cried. My temperature went up to 104. Everyone else got better. I didn't. They didn't take me to the hospital, though. I lay there hot, delusional and scared that I would die in that bed. My dad brought me back the drawing pad. He gave me a Pepsi and some Oreos. Not sick food, of course, and I knew they gave it to me because they thought I was going to die, and that just made it worse. I obviously didn't die. If I did, this story would be proof of the afterlife. But I was terrified. Every time I dozed off, I began crying, thinking that everything that used to be me would be wiped into oblivion. I eventually got better, but the abuse didn't get better, and finally my dad fired her by putting a note under her door. That evil woman left, and I never laid eyes on her again. But that is not the scariest part of this story. This story is terrifying for another reason. I know if I ever found her, and I am not trying to, I would hurt her. I wouldn't be able to help myself. I'm the most peaceful person you could ever know, and I hate violence. And I don't like feeling sorry for myself, and there are people in the world who have been abused much worse than I have been. But I still have a rage in me, and that rage is scary too. And I feel if I ever see her again, I may unleash that rage and that anger onto her. And I'm not that kind of person. But she whipped my hands with a belt and made me afraid every day in my own home. That is unforgivable. Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. I made a little joke earlier, and I promised the first person who understood it would get a shout out, but I'm going to go ahead and give a shout out to everybody who got the reference I was making, as long as they guessed it was Steve Goodman or David Allan Coe. I honestly do not listen to Taylor Swift, so I didn't know that she used the words too. So good job, and a shout out to Shelley Samandi, Lonza Fairchild, Tim Longston Jr., Jamie Northcott, Crazy Cooler, Michael James, and Hi at Chunky Funky 30. You guys got the reference, and thanks for indulging me in my silliness. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please feel free to click the subscribe button and bell below, or click the icon of Ichigo the cat that will appear at the end of this closing. Leave me a comment, and share this video with someone you think might enjoy it. If you have an original story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please email it to the address included in the description. But most importantly, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.